Get Pucked. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Dave, Vito, and Matt here today, and it's been a little bit of time. How you guys doing?
Good.
Holidays are around the corner. I'm happy.
Good.
Can you
Always
tell?
good.
I'm happy.
You're always happy. That we can always tell. Thank you so much for everybody tuning back in. I know it's been a little bit of a hiatus. There's been lots of stuff. I won't get into all the details. Just call it scheduling conflicts and personal stuff. And anyways, we're here now. And for those that have been sitting around and letting us know and asking us on DMs and what have you when we're coming back, we're back. And thank you very much for the support and checking in. And with that in mind, let us talk about hockey, in particular the Canadiens. And a lot's happened in the last 3 weeks. We're not going to rehash the whole thing, but some important things got brought up, and I feel we should probably get into it. One of them, not always the most sexy topic, but something I think maybe we talk more about in this market than perhaps any of the other markets, is the coach. And Martin St. Louis has been on the hot seat. Some would say. Others are saying, nope, he can do no wrong, and all season it can be up, down, sideways. It doesn't matter. He's the right guy for the job today. Let it go. It doesn't matter what he does, how he does it. Everything's great. And I'm just curious where your guys' stance is. Have you enjoyed what you've seen from Martin St. Louis? Do you make any excuses for some of the things that he's done, perhaps being too harsh for one or two specific players that some people have taken exception with? Do you like that he's the development coach, so to speak, or a coach with a development on his mindset in the NHL versus a coach that is presumably here to do what it takes to win games? I'm just curious. All these narratives are out there. What's your pulse on Martin St. Louis?
I'll start. Renaud Lavoie had sent out a tweet, where for the first time since Martin St. Louis became the coach, he actually had a healthy roster as soon as Laine got back. Now, we got a comment that somebody mentioned Reinbacher, but I think Reinbacher was destined for Laval one way or another, regardless. And the fact that he's still with the Montreal Canadiens is only because he got hurt while he was with the Montreal Canadiens, so might as well keep him around with the NHL club, but he was headed towards Laval. I still think MSL, Martin St. Louis, is still the right guy for the job from a development perspective. And the fact that he's actually starting to make people accountable and penalizing certain players and whatnot is something that we haven't seen in the previous seasons. Now, this needs to continue, because the one thing, it was a bit of a free-for-all in a sense, where everyone had the low expectation that, it's a rebuild, we're developing players, where we got to go through the uphill battle of every player building their instincts and trying to figure things out like that. And now it's, they want to get over that hump and go into the next level, and the only way they can possibly do that is by starting to make certain players accountable. And let's be honest, there are certain players right now that are not playing up to their potential. Now, could they be upset a little bit? Maybe. We don't know. We're not in the dressing room. But at the same time, be professionals. Go out there, give as much of yourself as possible, and prove yourselves, because the last thing we want is to have a losing mentality going forward and being like the Buffalo Sabres, where they have everything on paper. It should be better than what it is, but they kept losing. And it's like, we're used to that. We don't want that. And we shouldn't want that for the players either. So I'm all for making them accountable. And sometimes it means that certain players that you wouldn't expect have to skip a shift, so be it. I do think that Martin St. Louis is still the right guy right now for where this team is at. Will he be the right guy when they take the next step? Time will tell. Dave has mentioned it in a past episode that Martin St. Louis is basically growing as a coach, just like a lot of these players are growing as players.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? He is kind of just growing as a coach. And, there's a lot. I want more from Marty St. Louis. I think that there's a lot that he has to improve. And I'm not saying he can't get there. And I'm not saying, but I think everyone kind of fell in love with him, when he hand gloves off and anybody could do what they want, and everyone's production went up, but, they weren't held accountable, and they weren't meant to win games yet. And now that it's time, everyone wanted to step forward, and you kind of see it there, the lack of improvement this year. And the injury thing is one thing, but at the end of the day, every single team has injuries constantly. Nobody has. I'd actually be interested in looking at the stats of how many teams have an 100% healthy roster and for how many games during the year. There's a reason a lot of companies sponsor the injury reports. Okay, it's constant. It's a constant. There's always a slew of players. It's the NHL. Everyone's always injured. So I'm not going to let him off the hook because it was his first game with a complete lineup. Like, that means nothing to me at the end of the day.
It should mean something. It means nothing.
Nothing.
It doesn't.
Since he took over as the coach, he hasn't had a single healthy roster. Heck, even when Sean Monahan came there and was supposed to be, a boost and whatnot, he got
it's
hurt.
The NHL. You have to win. You have to win despite injuries. You have to find a way to win, and that's just the nature of the game. And I'm actually, like, if you guys want me to do a deep dive, like, I'm sure there's some games where it was just a role player that was missing, or you know what I mean. Like, at the end of the day, yes, he had some key injuries. He had stuff like that, but you got to take a step forward, and you can't use injuries as an excuse in the NHL. That's just not how it's done. Look, I mean, did Vegas complain when Mark Stone was on IR for a whole entire year? It worked out in their favor.
Part of their strategy.
It's part of their strategy.
They found a way to win without him. How? One of their best players gone for an entire year. How they win without him?
100%. It can't just be all about the injuries, without question. I think I'm more curious to know, because the way the team had played up until Laine's return left a lot to be desired in a lot of areas of the game, and a lot of people were pointing fingers at the coach, not so much the players. Do you put it on the coach, or do you put it more on the players? And I don't want to hear this both kind of nonsense.
But hold on a second. For the last 2.5 seasons that St. Louis has been there, most the injuries he's had, if you take those same equivalent players on other teams, take McDavid out of Edmonton, what's happening there? You know what I mean?
The Canadiens don't have a McDavid.
They don't have
and Nick Suzuki didn't miss a single game. Like, that's not at all the
Caufield did. Slafkovsky did.
Caufield did last
year.
Now
Laine did. Monahan did then. Kirby Dach was a whole freaking season.
Yeah, okay. Kirby Dach in his 0 points in the last 9 games was missed 82 games. Okay,
I get it. Congratulations this year. But if you take out a lot of these players that are part of their top 6 out, what do you want to do? What's he working with? Joe Armia was on the top 6. Josh Anderson in the top 6.
Again, it's not in the win-loss column that I'm looking to for improvement. I'm looking at improvement on how they play hockey, man. And there's certain guys who didn't progress the way you're supposed to progress. And then there's questionable decisions in terms of ice time. And Emil Heineman has proven that he deserves more than being slotted on the 4th line every time those freaking line charts come out. He hasn't put him anywhere near where he's supposed to be, in my opinion. Uri Slafkovsky is clearly struggling. He hasn't been able to get him out of the funk, which is what you look for in a development coach who's able to talk to his players. They played 2 great periods against Washington, but terrible 3rd period, and kind of just let it go. Like, those are signs of a coach. Those are things where coaching steps in and plays a big role in. So yes, I understand and I sympathize with the injury. Okay, and I get he wasn't dealt the best hand in terms of that, but it's in the individual and kind of the team and the system play that you want to see a step forward, and I just haven't seen enough of a step forward. And again, there's a whole season ahead of us. Okay, guys, there's a ton of time for this to happen, and I'm not calling for the firing of Marty St. Louis, but you can't just be like, he has injuries. Let's move on, and that's what it is.
I think they ate up about 30% of the game so far this season. It's about 30%.
What ate up 30% of the game?
Like 30% of the games have been played so far.
Season? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's a ton of time.
It's still a ton of time, but it's significant. It's a big chunk of the season's gone.
It wasn't the best start, and I get you were without Patrick Laine, but again, if you go back, like, everyone wants to point out the Patrick Laine thing, like, they weren't planning for. Like, Patrick Laine came very late in the off season, and everyone was ready to go forward without Patrick Laine before they made that move, right? So. And we're still expecting a bit of a step forward. So it's not necessarily an excuse that you could go back on and just be like, oh, look, there's no. I mean, look, Kirby Dach has not improved whatsoever. And you could talk all you want about coming back from an injury, but you want to see something. You don't want to see a goose egg in terms of points. In the last 9 games, 3 of them with Patrick Laine on his side. You don't want to see Uri Slafkovsky. Yeah. Same thing with Uri Slafkovsky. He's taking a huge step backward in terms of it. And obviously he'll get out of it. But Marty St. Louis' role is to get these guys out of it. And he's a so-called development coach, as I keep saying, and how you guys keep saying. And this is what his specialty is supposed to be. If you don't want to talk about the defensive system and this and that and how you're going to play ice time minutes and whatnot, it's how to get these guys out of funks. And it's just there's lacking there. There's no denying it. And again, I'm willing to give him time. I'm willing to give him a ton of time to figure this out. He has a whole season, in my opinion, now to work around and find a way that fits. But it's not enough of a step forward in my books. And it's not a fireable offense, but it is a concern. And to just blindly say, no concern whatsoever, it's fine because he's been dealing with injuries is naive.
I didn't say that. I was just pointing out the fact that it's one of it's a reason in a grouping of reasons.
But there are questionable things that he's doing. So, like, I'm a huge Martin St. Louis fan, and I think he is the right coach. I'll be the first to say that. And I think what he's doing, I think there's a big part of it. And I know we probably talk culture more than any other market as well. But I think the culture that he has made here is going to pay dividends in the long run. But to echo your point, Dave, I think certain decisions on the ice are baffling. And that is only coaching specific. You put Christian Dvorak out on certain situations in overtime. You're like, why? Why? Because he has a slightly better percentage at the dot. Like, and then he's out there. What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. Then you got things like Slafkovsky, who is clearly, like you say, not playing to where he was at. And a lot of that has to do with, I don't think he's meshing well with the chemistry of the guys he's been playing with. Put him back on the top line. Why do you have Alex Newhook up there still? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Kirby Dach. Yeah, you want to try to get this guy going, but it's not going. Maybe move Newhook back to center and put Dach on his wing and do Newhook, Dach, and Laine or something now that Laine is back. There just doesn't appear to be a lot of, and the Heineman thing as well, which is interesting. Jake Evans playing your second lines. There's been stuff.
But you know they're not going to do anything right now when in the last 3 games they're 2-1.
So let's talk about that for a second, right? Laine comes back, and that first game, it was like jubilation. It was like they played well. Laine scored. It was great. Everything was good. They looked good. Then you're like, okay, was it lightning in a bottle, or are we seeing something? The second game comes back, looks great too. But bear in mind, who did they play? It's important to point this out, and I'm not trying to make it a down here. They played good hockey objectively, but they beat the crap out of the worst team in the league.
Yes, and the Islanders game, you can argue that if Sam Montembeault didn't make some key saves,
he was huge. They would have lost.
They're not even going to overtime.
That's right. That's right. So that is a big factor. But they played 2 great periods of hockey against the best team in the league. And then something happened in the third where I don't know why, if you don't keep pressing, you decided to turtle up a bit more. And then,
they didn't play the full 60 minutes. And
that's it. But so that happens.
They had 4 breakaways and they didn't capitalize on those breakaways.
Right. But can we not say that with Laine back, the team looks better?
Well, of course. They have another weapon.
But much better. Like more complete. Well, and that first power play is looking much better, and things are moving. You got more weapons. So now I'm asking, if you take a look at the standings for a second, as crazy as it sounds, because it feels like they've done nothing but lose all season. It feels that way. But they're only a handful of points away from a wild card, which is
everyone else sucks too.
They all suck. But that is the nature of the beast. So my question is this now. If you have the option, like Vito mentioned, you're about a third of the way through the season. Let's call it average. Okay? 2/3 left. You're at where you're at now. Would you prefer that this be the moment with Laine's return that now all of a sudden they're chasing that wild card? And that's how you like the season to end? Let's not say they make playoffs even. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. They're close enough to wild card and they miss it by a handful of points, and that's where they end up? Or would you prefer the rest of the 2/3 of the season be as entertaining hockey as possible, but they're a lottery team with one of the top 5 picks? What would be your preference?
They don't go hand in hand, I don't think, in my opinion. Like, you can't really be a lottery team and have interesting games. I don't care what you say, but like that's a lot of losing, and it's either going to be terrible or it's going to be you're going to see a little bit of progress. I'd much rather see them take a step forward, to be honest. Again, like I'm kind of done with the waiting around for draft picks and watching terrible hockey year after year because they could just collect these draft picks that aren't sure things. Like, let's just see a step forward. You could still get a good pick if you claim you have an amazing scouting staff. You know, you're comfortable with your scouting guys. You could probably find a gem later on. Just take the step forward, man. Like, that's what I want to see.
Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, of course I think it's possible. I think, again, they should be way better than what they are, in my opinion. I think that they should absolutely be way better, especially if Montembeault can start, you're starting to see a little bit more consistency from him. If he could keep that, their defense is kind of rolling into shape just a little bit more than they were. A bit of a disaster at the beginning of the season. It's starting to roll a little bit better. You're starting to see some pairing. Like I like that Struble with Hudson. Like I like a few of these things that you're starting to see a little bit more in games. Like there's ways that you could absolutely Laine's back. If you could start getting Dach to produce, if you could put Slafkovsky and back on that first line and get something going, like it's absolutely possible. They don't have, in my opinion, a bottom 5 team right now. I think that they could definitely, they have some assets, but they need to make it work, man. And that's, again, goes back to the coaching and what they can get out of these guys. They're not a lottery team, like, in my opinion. Absolutely not.
Okay. Good.
The Atlantic is
I didn't think you'd be that positive. Okay.
The Atlantic is so tight right now. Like Montreal, even as bad as they are only 6 points out of a wild card spot. So they're kind of in the mix. You know what I mean?
But on paper, yes.
The games haven't been the most entertaining that by any stretch of the imagination. But just to say, it's tight. It's 6 points. It could take nothing for them to just get right that close to the last wild card spot and be competitive. I do agree with Dave. They are not a bottom 5 team, even though right now the standings would suggest otherwise. They're not. But at the same time, I want to see. I said it at the beginning of the year. I expected them to finish somewhere like 7th to 10th, and that was going to be like, okay, we see some progression. But we always said that there's certain players I wanted to see them take the next step. There were certain concerns, with Caufield coming back, and how was he going to be? Was he going to be the 40-goal guy, or are we going to see a 20, 25-goal guy? Slafkovsky, at the end of last season, he was on a 70-point. He was playing at a 70-point pace, and then he's tapered off this season. Something happened to him this year. There's definitely some regression in his game right now. But I expect he's going to kickstart maybe after the holidays is my expectation. We'll see. Kirby Dach is the biggest disappointment thus far, and I think he would be he'll admit he's disappointed in his own game. He's got to figure things out. But as far as being a lottery team, everyone says that Montreal, at least mostly everybody, is saying that Montreal has one of the deepest, if not the best prospect pool there is. So I think it's time now we start to add certain pieces that are going to complement the prospects that are coming, that are going to mentor the prospects that are coming, that are going to be veterans, not in the 35 range. So it's time to take the next step and not only be a lottery team. I don't want to be the lottery team anymore. Yeah, so
next
draft.
You want them to progress and try to go for it. Like, I'm just trying to get to the crux of the answer to the question. You're agreeing with Dave, right?
I want them to show that they could compete for that wild card spot. Be entertaining, be competitive, be in the mix in that sense. I'm not saying you have to be in the mix of saying you got to make the playoffs. Because even if they make the playoffs, what are they going to make it for? To get out in the first round?
Listen, once you're in, and anything can happen. I just think it's fascinating that you're both saying this.
Let's be realistic.
Mark? Hold on a second, because I just want to point out that, and I don't think Dave was here the last time that we talked, but go back 3 weeks. The conversation that we were having, and probably the conversation many people were having, was in the mix is a joke. They should have never said that. They gave false expectations. This is a lottery team. What did you expect? Blah, blah, blah. Now we fast forward 3 weeks. They strung together 2 2/3 of a game of really good hockey with Laine's return. And I'm just saying, like you both, many people are saying, look, and this is why I asked the question. They're saying, look at the standings. 6 points out of a wild card, progression going on, playing better, things are good, back in the mix. And so I feel like the fan base is on a roller coaster right now, and it kind of makes me laugh a little bit. And I'm on the same roller coaster. 3 weeks ago, I was a doomsayer. Now I'm like, come on, boys, let's go.
But the way I see it is if they end up being in the mix, really in the mix, great. If they become a lottery team, but they're playing entertaining hockey, great. It's another.
But let's say they don't play entertaining hockey.
Unfortunately, and Dave, your friends at TSN 690 mentioned this. This is a Slafkovsky-esque draft. It's one of those drafts that are coming up that you're gonna get a very good piece. That's gonna be a piece of the puzzle, but it ain't no Gavin McKenna. You know what I mean? It ain't no generational change the tide, change the course of the team type of draft. It's gonna be a good draft, but not elite. So it's again, if Montreal becomes a bottom 5 team, it's in one of those drafts. So I'm not saying I don't want that player and I don't want another Slafkovsky. Of course I do. I'll take that any day of the week. But I said at the beginning of the season, and I'll say it again now, I want them to be show us that the last 2 years there's been forward momentum now.
Yeah, I mean, look, rebuild seasons are roller coasters by definition. You know what I mean? You're gonna have times where you're hot. You're gonna have times where it's a disaster and you're terrible. I think though the momentum has to carry you forward, man. It has to keep going up and up and up, and you have to be able week in and week out after you take a look at it, say, yeah, this team is slightly improving and heading in the right direction. And right now, you're not really seeing that from a week-to-week basis. Again, you go back to being like a doomsday. This is the worst hockey I've seen in forever. And then the next week, it's like, oh, okay, they got a bump by Laine. Okay, maybe they can make a run at it. And look, it's the NHL, right? Like it's always, you're never going to be that out of it, especially if you could string some wins along here and there and go on a little, tiny winning streaks. The Canadiens are very far off from being contenders. And I think because of the Marc Bergevin, get in and see what happens, 10 years of that, the Habs fans have been conditioned to be like, oh, like anybody who makes the playoffs can be a contender. But the Canadiens are so far off from being contenders. But they can be in the mix for a playoff spot, especially in the East, which is just an absolute, like there's so many teams in the same exact position of them of being in a rebuild, and most of them being in like the Buffalo Sabres just had the best prospect pool like 4 years ago. They're still terrible. So it's just it's forever and ever and ever just like the Senators, the Red Wings, it's all meh teams right there that you could just leapfrog over. The Flyers, like there's just a million of them in the Eastern Conference that you could probably just leap over. So I do think that you need to kind of be in the mix, and being in the mix doesn't mean you're a contender. And I think you've got to make a big difference between. Yeah, it's a huge distinction, and I think half fans kind of blur sometimes, especially with the miracle run with Carey Price.
And that's the point I was getting at. So even if they make it into the playoffs, then okay, great, they made it to the playoffs. But guess what they became? They became that team that everyone was complaining about 4 years ago, that they're a middle of the pack team. We can't get a good pick, and we're getting ousted in the first round.
But now they got their good picks.
Yeah, man. So that's the difference. Now they got their pool of players, right? Yeah. Now this season, even let's say the season ended today, there are some flashes of good things that we saw. Elaine Hudson, there's certain things that have changed. We got to see, Laine's there, like things. You're going to see certain things that are going to be positive, and there's certain things that are going to be negative, and it's normal with a rebuilding team. Just because they said that they wanted to be in the mix, it's a desire. They want to be in a mix. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're saying we're going to be contenders. We're going to go for the Stanley Cup. It doesn't necessarily mean either that they're not going to come out not being entirely in the mix, but they're going to get a player. Probably they're still in a rebuild. At the end of the day, they never said we're done with the rebuild. It's done. We're going on to the next thing. We all know that the average rebuild is 5 to 7 years. Sometimes teams advance that and ends up being like a 3-year thing, and all of a sudden they have great success and whatever. And there's some teams that never get out of it, really. Hopefully Montreal is not one of those teams that never get out of it, because that would be terrible.
I
just want meaningful hockey now. Meaningful in the sense of, like, it doesn't only have to be meaningful for the playoffs. Meaningful to see that the suffering, quote unquote, that we went through the last few years is now going to start to show that we got these talented players that are coming up. We got the quarterback defenseman in Laine Hudson that you're starting to see it. He's on a point streak. You're going to see eventually that power forward in Slafkovsky, shooting more, doing his thing. Like, you're going to see these things, and that's what I want to see. That's what I always meant when I wanted to see forward progression with this team. Because eventually, once all that comes together, they'll be successful.
Until recently, you have players that are regressing, not progressing. You got Caufield, that obviously everybody is very happy with his near leading goal totals that he has.
But look what he was last year.
Exactly. So that's a good story. I think nobody's going to knock Suzuki. I think he's doing what he's doing. Maybe some are going to nitpick a bit and say, "Oh, I want even more. He has to be that much more." But maybe this is what he is. And he's maintaining this very high level, and he draws the hardest jobs when he has to go in matchups. Thank you. And so, I don't think there's anything from my perspective about Suzuki that I would necessarily ask for more of. Laine Hudson comes in. He's a revelation. We didn't know what he was going to be, and it looks like he's the real deal, and that's fantastic. You got Demidov that's coming. By all accounts, is going to be a superstar right out the gate. So you got that too. But you got guys like Slav. I love Slav, but they got to do something with him, and I think he's more important than Kirby Dach. And Kirby Dach, that's a whole other thing. But we teeter on. You watch him play, and you're like, there's something missing to his game, and there's like maybe an intensity or something, or maybe there's a bit
He's
of
not
timidness.
playing like a 6'4" guy, 220-pound dude.
It's between the ears. It's between the ears.
And he's caught up
probably
in his head.
Yes. Now, in addition to that, and confidence being an all-time low, he's drawing some pretty bad penalties as well, and he's not doing himself any favors. So I don't necessarily know what you need to do for him, but I know what you need to do for Slafkovsky. You got to get him on the first line. To me, that's the most important thing they have to do right now is get Slav going again.
I think Kirby Dach needs to go at least sit a game or two up in the stands and watch the game.
I think that shatters his confidence.
That's look.
Then,
the knock
if that's
on
the
him,
case, he's a fragile.
Well, he is. But that was a knock on him. That was
Yeah.
a knock on him when he first got acquired and people went to Chicago and they talked to the Chicago media. They said two things. The one thing was a little bit of the work ethic. Remember, I think I brought it up, one of the first things ever, that he wasn't the guy who was always there working every single practice hard thing, and also the confidence and the hockey, not necessarily hockey IQ, but just the mentality to be an NHLer. That was what his demise was, because the guy has all the skill in the world. That's why he was drafted where he was drafted, and obviously the injury factor, the concerns. But so to me, when I see that and I see what I see, I mean, it's. I don't think putting him up in the press box is going to do him any favors. I just don't see it. I mean, you could try at one point when you just get discouraged, you try anything, and who knows what will work.
Sorry to cut you off, but I don't think the way he's playing in the games he's playing, and every night coming out of that game, feeling the way that he's feeling is going to do him any favors either way. So you might as well say, hey, watch the game from a bird's eye view.
I got to disagree with you.
I agree with you. Disagree also, because all he needs is a puck to go off his skate and in the net twice, like a little tip in here, and his confidence can go back. Whereas that won't happen when he's in the press box, in my opinion.
Plus, who are you sitting him for? Pizzetta?
I think at this point,
who hasn't played in 20 games?
You reshuffle the lines. I'm only saying a game or two. I'm not saying make it a Pizzetta streak of 17 games.
No, he needs to be put in situations where, like Dave's saying, he's got to play. He's got to be told in any way, shape, or form. He's like, just make it simple. Then get out there. Just try to refine your game. Try to get back in it. The question about Kirby Dach is really one of these things where the man missed an entire year. Okay, and when you come back from that, what you have to think about, management and fan base alike, is how much rope do you give him until you start to say it's a problem. Some people are suggesting we're there now. Some people are saying you got to give him the whole year. The whole year has to be played out for him to regain his confidence and his legs back, and look at him next year.
Well, the full year would give him that I didn't get hurt. I completed a year for the first time in my career. It'll give him those things that he could feed off of. The other thing I'm thinking as a solution is play him on the third line, so he's not playing against other top six players for now. Give him the quote unquote the easier matchups. Put him on the third line. Be the center on the third line if you have to. Maybe even move Jake Evans or be the winger on the third line, so he doesn't have to have those defensive responsibilities that a center would have. And then put Newhook to the middle on the second line for now temporarily, and you shuffle the lines that way. But that way you put him in the bottom six. Not fourth line, but a third line role. You still give him the minutes with the power play, so it's not like he's losing too much. But you say, hey, you're going to have favorable matchups. Now, based on your skill set and who you are, you should technically have success here. If you can't get success on the third line at this point, then it's really between the years and you need time off.
Well, nothing's ever a guarantee, but I do like drawing against weaker matchups. Although you do have that other notion too, that right now he's playing with two highly skilled players and it's not working. You put him down on the third and he plays with lesser skilled players, and it's like you expect him to produce more. Plus, do you really want to break up that third line that's been playing so well? That's a good line with good chemistry, which means if you don't break that, you put them on the fourth.
Yeah, but those guys are very they're black and white players.
I'm not saying
you can always just put that line back together, and they're just going to do exactly what they were doing and pick up where they left off.
The problem right now, the problem the team has right now is they fall into the oldest trope that exists that's out there, which is the team is playing well, change nothing. It does like don't run it back every game over and over until they start to put a bunch of bad games together, then go and mix it up. That's I understand it, but I also really don't like it because I believe that you should be able to tinker with a winning solution to maybe even make it better, to get more out of your guys. And I don't think by moving around Kirby Dach and changing up your lines a little bit, suddenly you're going to go from teams that were putting forth decent efforts to complete disasters. So I just don't understand the and I bring it back to Slaf again. I bring it back Dach and not like moving him out to somewhere else and moving things around a bit. Why do they not do this? What is the holdback for this? I don't see. Alex Newhook is not going to be your top line guy. Why is he still there? And he played some good games. I'm not trying to knock on Newhook. I find it funny that he's got 6 or 7 goals with 1 assist or whatever it is.
The only reason why I could explain Newhook on the first line is because of the speed he's able to generate. And when you look at Caufield and Suzuki, they're not the fastest skaters in the world. So it's basically rushing the puck in off the rush that you could see Newhook has that speed to be able to do that.
But they, look at the success they had last year, man. Slaf on that first line with Caufield and Suzuki, they were by far the best line.
I think they wanted to get back to that. I do think everybody wants it to get back to that. But Slaf is not playing like the way Slaf was at the end of last year.
I prefer the way Slaf was playing when he wasn't getting points, but he was on the top line than the way Slaf looks like now. Now he does not look good. Now I don't like what I'm seeing. Versus before, it looked like he's there, he's putting forward efforts. I can see some stuff, but they're not capitalizing. And this is where we come back to that initial conversation of teetering back and forth, where are we here to develop the players in season, or are we here to try to win games? And I don't think you can necessarily do both well. You have to choose a direction. I think the direction they're choosing right now is win and try to focus on development as much as possible. And listen, time will tell. And I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. And like we've all been saying, there's a lot of hockey left over in this season. I just think that there's some easy things that they can do right now. And at least from my amateur perspective, I don't see why they don't make these moves. Because to me, just like it's a simple matter of flipping 1 or 2 guys in positions. And I think you're going to see success there.
Well, they finally put Laine Hudson on the first power play.
Yeah.
Finally. Only took 20-something games. Also, I want to see more of Emil Heineman. I don't care what anybody says. I want to see what
he looks like a real deal, that kid.
It's absolutely it's so frustrating to see.
Where do you put him?
He's replacing Joel Armia. You could use him. Honestly,
you don't think he's going to be a better player than Joel Armia? Just out of curiosity.
No, I said he's replacing Joel Armia.
Oh, you mean you're replacing? Okay.
Yeah, honestly, Heineman ceiling, I'd probably see him as a guy who could be on the third line, provide some secondary scoring because he's got a potent shot. And in game, if there happens to be an injury in game, you slot him on that second. Let's say somebody gets hurt on the top 6, and you'll be like, okay, he's going to just do the job.
Well,
but he's not. He's not a guy who should be casted on the second line.
But let me ask you real quick, just for the sake of kind of a closing point on this, out of curiosity, because I know a lot of people make a big deal about the lines 1, 2, 3, and 4th line, right? That's a big thing. Does this team have a legit 3rd line, 4th line, or are they 2 third lines and it really doesn't matter how you write the names in? It just that's what they have. Or 2 4th lines. I mean, you tell me.
On paper, they're 2 third lines, but when you actually see them on the ice, no, you see. No, well, you could see the Jake Evans line. It's a 3rd line. It's a legit 3rd line. It's that 4th line it's a 4th line. On paper, they could be like, oh, there's Armia there, there's this person, that person, whatever, fine. But no. They play like a 4th line, and it's like very meh. And it's funny because we made a whole episode saying, do they have one of the best bottom 6s in the NHL?
Yeah, that did not age well. You should never
well, on paper, right? On paper, Nashville should be a contender. Look where they're at. We can only know what's happening, man. Like, you got to see, they got to play it out for you to actually see it. But anyways, I digress. I'm going to bring it to a close here. Thanks everybody again so much. Again, we apologize for taking the time off, but life happens and it is what it is, and we're happy to be back. Thanks for tuning in and checking in on us. And as always, we like to know what you guys think. Let us know your thoughts on Martin St. Louis at about a third into the season now and in his 3rd year. What your take is, how he's doing. Do you want him to stay? Is he the right guy? Do you want him gone? Let us know equally about your opinions on Slafkovsky and Dach and what you would do with them and Let us just know everything and anything. We're always there to answer your questions. If you have any for us in the comments, or just to read your comments. Sometimes you guys say some really hilarious stuff, and it makes us smile for days. And we enjoy that very much. Also, consider liking and subscribing. You know the whole deal, what have you. Thanks very much for that, for those that do it. And I think that's going to bring it in. We'll be back, I'm telling you, before the holidays, without question. We're going to try to make this more of a routine thing. So please keep an eye out, notifications on for when a new episode pops out. And that's it. Very happy to be back, guys. So for Dave and Vito, I'm Matt, and this was
Get Pucked.